Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast, where aspiring entrepreneurs learn what it takes to find, buy, and build successful franchise businesses. My name is Drew Carpenito, and I'm your host as we dive into these fascinating behind-the-scenes stories of people who have used surprising franchises to create massive success. I'm glad you're here. Let's dig in. Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast. Today, I am joined by two very special people I'm excited to talk to. Amy and Jesse Hudson, who are successful franchise owners with the Exercise Coach. And they're also a dynamic duo because Jesse has been involved on the franchise development side of the Exercise Coach for a number of years, in addition to other things he's done in franchising. And Amy is building an amazing operation, taking the lead on building an amazing operation, multi-unit operation with the Exercise Coach. So Amy, Jesse, welcome.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks for having us.
Good to have you. Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, no, glad you guys could be here because I think you guys have, you're building, something that a lot of people who listen to the podcast aspire to, and, a successful multi-unit operation and maintaining a very, a very family-oriented lifestyle at the same time as you take care of the daughters and the family and all that good stuff. So looking forward to getting into this, but would love to start with your guys' story and kind of how you got into this whole franchise racket and how things are going.
Sure. Well, I tell my story a lot on a lot of calls with candidates, so I kind of have a good idea of how to start here. But we were living in the Chicago area. We were married for a few years. Amy's from Chicago. I'm originally from Minnesota. We're in Minnesota now, but we spent about 10 years in the Chicago suburbs. And when we were there, we actually met the co-founder and CEO of Exercise Coach, Brian Sagan, and his wife, Jerry Ann, through church, just through, meeting them and going to church on Sunday and being involved. We had little kids. They had kids that were a little bit older than ours, and we just became friends. And turns out he had these fitness studios and he had just hired an attorney to write his FDD. And I didn't know what an FDD was or what franchising was. And through a series of events, I was able to go to work for him in the very beginning. I had a little bit of real estate and construction background, and I'm not shy to talk to people. So in terms of, working with prospects and things like that. And so we kind of, most people get into franchising sort of on accident, right? A lot of us talk about how we were doing something else, and then we went to work for a franchise company, and then we stayed in the industry for a while. So I went to work for him, and we kind of helped at the very beginning get some things going. And Amy became a client of the location. Since I was working for Brian, she got a free membership, and that's kind of where her love of the Exercise Coach came from a client perspective. And I worked there with him for 6 years in Illinois, and then we moved our family back to Minnesota, but I kept working for him even remotely, and have been kind of involved from the very beginning. So it's been fun to see early stage, founder led sort of bootstrap startup into emerging and now into national, and kind of being part of all the different elements and learning a lot about the franchise life cycle from that perspective.
Fantastic. So you guys were early days. So when was the decision made to open a couple Exercise Coaches?
Yes. So once we moved up to the Twin Cities, as Jesse said, we had relocated from Chicago to Minnesota. And having been a client of the Exercise Coach, I told Jesse, I can't live without the Exercise Coach. Can we open one here? And we had always talked about going into business together one day or doing something together. And we had this brand that we were familiar with, we knew inside and out, and we appreciated the value of firsthand from just the changes that I had noticed in my own health and life, having been a client, and then learning about how strength training really can change people's quality of life all the way up till the end of their life, reducing disease risk and increasing brain function and bone density. I mean, it is life-changing. I said, we have to open one. And so we opened our first location in 2017, and then our second one in 2019, and then our third in 2021, because we want to bring this wonderful brand to as many people as we can locally. And I just really enjoy running businesses and empowering staff members and team members under me to grow into their fullest potential as well.
That's awesome. So you guys have 3 open now. That's no small feat. Congratulations. So Amy, what were you doing before you guys decided to open an Exercise Coach?
So my first career was a high school Spanish teacher, and I did that for 10 years. So teaching high school, a lot of fun. And then I had become just a stay-at-home mom for a couple years and enjoyed that as well. Did a few little hobbies on the side, but I had two daughters at the time, and then we had our third once we moved up to Minnesota. So I was balancing mom life with, having a previous skill set of high school teacher when we opened our first location. So
That's awesome. So did you always have the itch? Like, was the entrepreneurial itch kind of like always in the back of your mind? Or was it something that was kind of like, as you kind of saw what the exercise coach was doing and saw the opportunity in the Twin City market, what was the defining moment that said, hey, we should do this?
Yes, I would not say that I had always had an entrepreneurial itch. I was very happy with my previous career and happy being a mom and content in different seasons. But because we found a brand that I also became passionate about, I wanted to open one. And so Jesse, though, has always been very entrepreneurial, and his line of thinking has always been more that way than mine. And so I think that expanded my mindset and of the possibility of possibly succeeding at being a business owner and allowing that lifestyle to support, being a mom and balancing other things by running a semi-absentee business. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. And I mean, we both have business ownership in our immediate family. Her father and grandfather and one of her uncles has owned or currently owns small businesses where they work full time in it. My grandfather was a small business owner, both of them actually. So we both have that background, but I really gravitated growing up, my grandfather's stories of owning businesses and buying buildings and selling buildings and, starting businesses. I always was kind of enamored by that. And so I think he indoctrinated me a little bit in, he used to say, if you're going to take a risk on yourself, not on somebody else. And so he was always of the belief that if he owned and controlled a business, he could own and control his destiny. But he was a 12-hour a day, 7-day a week, business owner. I mean, we're talking, he owned a gas station. He owned a motel where they slept in the apartment behind the front desk. And if somebody checked in at 2 a.m., it was him in his bathrobe, like a little small town motel, not like a big downtown tower. So he always was very positive about business ownership. And I went to college and he was proud of me getting a college degree, but he always said that he would support that. And so part of when we came into the exercise coach, he was still alive at the time. He really encouraged me, hey, take a shot on something that can grow. You're young and it sounds like Brian's got a cool thing. And so I had a positive view of business ownership and Amy had a background in business ownership as well. But I've always been a little bit more, I'm going to take a shot, and if it fails, it's on me kind of thing. And so I've kind of, the two of us have balanced each other out well, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, it seems like it for sure. So what was it like what was like the moment when you guys were like, hey, we need to do this?
I think it was, we moved up here and we had talked about doing it. Part of the move was, so in Illinois, we had awarded and they had opened most of the good territories within, call it 30 to 45 minutes of where we lived. And we both loved the Twin Cities. It's hard for people that aren't from here to understand why you'd love a place that has cold winters, but it's a great place to raise a family. We both went to college here. And I said, look, if we move there for just quality of life and family purposes, it's a wide open map if we ever wanted to do the exercise coach. And at the time we had two daughters and they were school age. So the original plan, sometimes we have to remind ourselves of this, was Amy would be able to send them off on the bus stop in the morning and then go into the studio in her exercise coach shirt and train the clients. And she was going to be the face of the business owner operator. And then we got here and we had a franchise agreement signed and we were starting to look for properties. And then we called June, our third daughter, our Minnesota baby. So we weren't expecting, but we're very happy that we have her, but we weren't expecting that. And so we had decided when we moved already to open the location, but we hadn't factored in an infant at the same time. And so I remember we went out to a restaurant for dinner after we found out that Amy was pregnant. And I said, do you still want to do this? I said, we can't do it the way we were going to do it. I said, we can't, maybe we delay it. Maybe we talk to the franchisor, but this is a big change in how we're going to run this business. And it doesn't make financial sense for us to put her in daycare and then for you to go in and be a trainer. We're going to have to run it with a manager. We're going to have to run it semi-absentee from the beginning. And we decided to go ahead anyway. So we had a different model than what we had intended. And, there were some learnings involved, obviously, in launching with the manager versus launching with the owner in there. 40, 50 hours a week, which, as you know, it's always a little easier if the owner's in there in the beginning. It's not necessary, but you certainly learn lessons faster that way. So we had to learn lessons through our staff, which was not what we had expected early on. But I think foreshadowing it actually made us more confident to launch a couple more stores, because, as you know, franchisees can love their business so much that they never scale out of it. Not because it's not working, but because they started training the clients or grooming the dogs or whatever the business is, and then they just stay there in that first unit. And so I think it really showed us, but especially Amy, that she's got an incredible talent for hiring and training. And that's really what I think you need to do to be that semi-absentee, that multi-unit owner.
So was the exercise coach, because this was pretty early days in their growth, right? Like, were they set up for semi-absentee ownership back then, or was it something that you guys kind of had to navigate through to figure out?
Sure. I think the model has always been able to be run semi-absentee. It's a pretty simple business model, and trainers deliver the service to the clients. Your employees really are the star of the show. But I think that the mindset of the owner has to be conducive to that. So the mindset of the owner has to be that my employees are my number one asset. And so my job is to develop and pour into them to make sure that they know what I need them to know in order to run the business successfully. So the owner's job in that scenario is, what are the needle moving activities within this business that make the most difference in the success? And how can I track those activities being done by the staff, and them executing on that when I'm not there? So that would be the owner's job then, is to oversee and to find a way to keep track of those things going on and learn that with your team, basically, as your studio is launching and growing and maintaining those things over time.
Yeah. And I would say, 5 years ago, the systems were there, but they're certainly, as you know, every year a franchise gets better at their systems. So, we had launched our store right before a brand new marketing system that has really revolutionized our business. So we were sort of one of the last one or two franchises open with the previous marketing model, which wasn't predictive. It worked, but you didn't know it was going to work all the time. And now we have a marketing model that we know is going to work all the time. And they've brought on dashboards. They brought on, a lot of platforms that make it easier now to be semi-absentee. But fitness always has been semi-absenteeable, if that's a word, because, customer comes to you, there's retention rate, there's membership model, like all that stuff that we know. I would say certainly now, 5 years later, like when we opened our third location, Amy went in and just went into the business manual and just went from the beginning as if she was a new franchisee. And she's like, wow, there's a lot more stuff in here. So, the franchisor, obviously, hopefully, if you join a brand every year, will continue to get better at some of that stuff. But I don't care how good the model is. If the franchisee can't hire and inspire a team, it doesn't matter what the franchisor systems have. So in my opinion, there are franchise models that are able to be run semi-absentee. And then there are franchise owners who are able to run a semi-absentee business. And those are both as critical of factors. So I think what we've learned is that there were certain things that, for example, like, why doesn't this employee know how to do this? Have we told them explicitly exactly how to do that? No. Then we can't assume that they know how to do that. Why isn't my manager running my business better? Well, that's a pretty nebulous question. What exactly would you like them to change? And, some of that little management stuff, you just have to learn. It's no different than training employees in corporate America, but it's your business and they're your employees now. And so I think that's something that I've really seen with Amy. She is a voracious learner. She loves to say, what don't I know and how do I learn it? How do I get better? How do I get 2% better at something? And she's gone on a journey over the last 5 years of really just listening to podcasts, reading books, paying for coaching, paying for seminars on mindset, things like that, and really become the owner that you need to be, I think, to run a multi-unit development and not pull your hair out. And you grow as an owner, right? You're not going to be the same person 5 years from now than you are today. And that's something that I coach my candidates on. Like, look, the first year in the first location is going to be your busiest because you're new to it. And that's okay. It's okay. But have the 2 to 5 year goal in mind. Don't get stuck in what's going on now. Say, how do I make this better so the next time? And so it's that mindset that we're really passionate about helping others understand as well.
I love it. Well said. So I got to ask, how did the two dates converge with baby June and opening of the exercise coach, your first location?
It was 9 months, 10 months.
Yes, it was like 10 or 11 months after she was born
Mm-hmm.
that we opened the studio, and it was ready to go. So
It's like,
We have
it's like
pictures
having,
of our real, when you go look at real estate, you take pictures and videos, right? When you go look at a space to put your store into, you take pictures and videos, and many of them, she was at least a little bit or very pregnant. So we have pictures of her pregnant and us touring a facility and open, an open space. So we were kind of doing the site selection and launch kind of around that time frame. And then we timed the store opening to be far enough beyond the birth where it wasn't bang, bang, like that wasn't going to work. And the franchisor was flexible. That what I will say is they gave us a little bit of extra time to open, because I said, look, our goal was, I think, the fall of the previous year. And I'm like, that's not going to work. That's going to be 2 months after the baby. Can we go to the spring? And they said, yeah, that makes sense. So you have to have a good partner in your franchisor when life stuff pops up too.
well, that's a busy 18 months, if we call it that, from the time you guys got the news to when you opened your first location. And I think it's funny because like that's kind of how business and life goes, right? Like you can have a plan, and then the plan changes, right? Like no plans ever go to according to plan. But if you're willing to adapt and just kind of, I hate to say it because I wish I had like a fancier way of saying this, but you just kind of figure it out as you go, right? And kind of have the confidence and that you're gonna forge forward and just get through it and come out the other side and continue to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's no small feat. I do sometimes tell people, I'm like, hey, like starting a business, it's kind of like having another kid because it needs a lot of attention at the beginning and then it grows a little bit, but it's a whole new dynamic in your life. And it's a blessing, rewarding, but it can be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's so much work at first, right? It's work at first. But I think if you put in the time right away, to get it off the ground and to build it the way you want it to run, that pays you back in the end, right? And so, but it does take building it up correctly from the get-go. And sometimes you have to make mistakes and say that didn't work. And what else could we try until you get it there? But then you have if you can do that, then you have more freedom to scale to another location or to give yourself the freedom back that you were looking for.
Yeah, well said. So fast forward to today, and you guys have 3 locations open. I'd love, because I think this whole like semi-absentee word, like really fun to say, and a lot of people say it, but there's there's the reality of what that means in terms of running your business truly semi-absentee, which is basically manager run, right? Is kind of how it boils down. But are you guys comfortable talking a little bit about kind of like what your weekly life looks like as the owners of a multi-unit operation being run semi-absentee, in terms of like what your management routines look like, how you're interacting with your staff, how what you guys are doing to pilot the operation you have?
Certainly, yes, I'd be happy to. So, my managers are really my eyes and ears within my business. They're hired based on personality qualities that they would bring to the team. When we seek out a manager, we look for somebody who is going to be great with people and driven to succeed. And the rest of the skills then are really groomed and taught, by me to the manager and worked on continuously. And so what I do with my management team so we'll start monthly. So monthly we meet we call them sales and leadership meetings. So in these meetings, we talk about the sales that the sales and the sales goals. How did our previous month go? What do we want to accomplish next month? And then what actions can we take as a team to get there? What does that look like? And what else, can we put into place? We analyze our sales and the needle movers related to those and create new goals. Sometimes it's amazing because saying a goal and stating it and putting it out there in front of your eyes really subconsciously does help you to, I think, sometimes achieve a little bit higher than you would have just hoping for the best, right? Mm-hmm. So we talk about that pretty in depth monthly, all 3 of my managers together with me on Zoom. We guide our conversation with a document where they populate some certain KPIs that we are able to look at the actual numbers. And then we talk about leadership. So you are a manager of a team, right? And so I have employees. I have 15 employees across 3 locations right now, but I do rely on my managers to develop the other team members underneath them. My managers are incentivized for their team members underneath them to perform well. And so one question I ask my managers is, on a scale from 1 to 10, give me a rating on how much you trust the rest of your team. You know, we're assuming that the manager has all of the mindsets and skills in place that, you know, I've taught them about how an ownership mindset, but then how much do you trust the rest of your team? And if that number is lower than you want it to be, then what needs to happen? What needs to happen? And answer that question in order for that person to be trusted more by you. And then when will we do that? You know, is it a training? Is it additional professional development? Is it something else, right? When will that happen? And then let's check back in with that in the next month. So the follow up and the identifying of what needs to happen ongoing, I think does separate sometimes, you know, a higher performing location from a lower performing location. I mean, I think the highest performers in any system are always the type of people that are asking themselves, how can I do better? Or there's always a little bit more I can do. And they're not really, you know, coasting along. So that's what we do monthly. Weekly, I also check in with my managers. I created a simple Google document that asks some certain pulse questions about how the studio is going. For example, how many leads did we get this week? How many people have been booked? Any happy clients? Any risky clients? What are we going to do about that? We check in on a weekly basis as well, just for those things. I'm able to discuss things with them and give them tips and mentorship that way related to things they need. And then, you know, as things evolve with the brand or new initiatives are happening or other things, of course, we do a lot of communication over text message and kind of constantly in different capacities to make sure that there's always that ongoing, and they know that I'm always there to support them as well. So that's really how I oversee them, but I really don't have to be in any particular location. I do like to go into my different locations and work out and get trained by some of my coaches as well, so that I can, you know, speak firsthand to how their skill set is as a trainer. And that's more for fun and for connection with me as the owner. Other than that, I'm able to, you know, that takes up, like Jesse said, about 15 hours of my week on average. I analyze my KPIs, I review my marketing goals. I try to do a little networking in the community. And then I have other time to work on being a mom and balancing the household and other projects I like to do. So that's kind of how my week looks now.
And I do virtually nothing to fill this out.
Yeah.
As you know, I have a full-time job where I'm actually working with Exercise Coach to help them, you know, sell franchises. So very rarely, it does happen on occasion, she'll ask me for my advice or for help, and I give it. But I'm honest with everybody that I should get a little tiny percentage of credit for this, but she's the one that's running the studios functionally, and I jump in only when there's something I can add value to, which at this point is very little, and I'm really proud of that. So,
well, that's amazing that you've figured out a routine and a meeting structure that fits well, pretty lifestyle friendly, but you're also able to do that by pushing down the accountability, and it sounds like the status quo is not acceptable in your guys' business, right? It's just, in a nice way, what's working, what's not working, and where are we trying to get to, and what are we going to do to get there? And then people have their tasks on what needs to happen, and there's check-ins. It's simple, it's elegant, but I know from just a management standpoint, right? Like there's a little bit of an art to holding those meetings and doing it in a fun way that engages the managers, that you know, kind of gamifies it a little bit, I would imagine, and but also helps the business grow and thrive. So
I read somewhere once that, you know, all employees love to be great at their job, and they want to know what winning looks like. I think it was in the 4 Disciplines of Execution book, and it talks about, like, do they know what winning looks like? And then, you know, how can we celebrate when we do win, right? And so kind of always dangling a carrot of, like, this is what we're trying to achieve. it's never like in a condescending way or in a condemning way if we don't quite hit it right. But it's always like we want to help as many people as we can. And so how can we do that better? And we can all win from that. And so I think it is every employee should know that you are out there to support them in becoming the best they can in order for the studio to become one of the top performers in the system. I think they take pride in that. So we try, yes, like you said, it can be a little bit of an art, but how do we inspire people that we're really, doing something special here?
And I'll just say, I'll give one of Amy's superpowers is she likes to delegate, and she trusts that people will largely do something right, which is really critical here. Our kids were doing their laundry at 10 because it's like, well, hey, it's a machine with buttons. I think my kids know how to run the washing machine slightly better than I do right now. But it's like, if we can teach them to do it, let the dog out, feed the animals, right, clean their room. But then it's like, do the laundry. Well, they can now make their own breakfast. Now they're making the 7-year-old's breakfast in the morning. Like, what can I delegate? And it's not because we have special children, although I do believe our kids are great, but it's not like they have some skill set. It's like, have you taught somebody how to do it? Have you encouraged them to do it? Have you trusted them to fail? And if their failure might cost you money or time, it just might, right? And you have to be okay with that. And so what I've seen with her is delegate, but then follow back up and make sure that it got done right and all that stuff. So even simple things like exercise coach business model doesn't have a lot of ordering. We have virtually no inventory, but there's some supplies, right? The printed, forms and whatever, gym wipes and all that stuff. And so she has one of her employees that wants a few extra hours and is organized. Okay, you do the ordering for the 3 studios. Here's how to log in. Here's how to do this. Anything that we can find, she can find to delegate that makes sense. So that she can focus on the things that they can't do. They can't run QuickBooks, or we're not going to let them, they're not going to be the ones deciding on how much to spend on Facebook that month or whatever. And so she's doing those things, even to the point where the managers run the reviews of the coaches. So the managers are doing the regular reviews of the coaches, and Amy's like, I'll help out when you need it. I think you sit in the first one, right? The first review.
I sit in the first one, but then after that, it's the manager with the employee, the coach.
And none of this is like something that only we could do or she could do, but it's just one of those things where being disciplined and setting up that structure and then saying, my goal is 5 years from now or 3 years from now to work 10 to 15 hours a week. And what do I need to do to get to that point? Right. And, we're 5 years in, so we've learned some things, but it's very doable. And that's what I think, needs to be said more often is it's doable. It's doable to get to this lifestyle, to own the business in this way. But what do we need to do to get there? And it's delegate, trust, hand off tasks, and then hold people accountable. And people will fail you. They will quit last minute. They will be, poor performers, and there's things you need to do. But you're not going to get there by everything running through your hands or running through your inbox. It's just not, you can't scale beyond a single location if you want to be the choke point for every decision. And I give her a ton of credit for seeing that early and making sure that she's not the person that nothing's really sitting on her desk hardly ever for very long. And that's important. So,
yeah, no, it sounds like you guys do the management execution really well. And then you also have the great leadership that kind of, cascades the, puts the grease on the wheels to make it fun and, create the culture. And you guys have the mission of, helping as many people as you can, it sounds like. So I got to ask, being a high school Spanish teacher, now running a multi-unit operation with one of your superpowers being delegating, but also it sounds like teaching, your staff and team how to do more things. And, like you said, people want to progress in their life and their career, right? So have you found that there's any similarities between running a classroom and teaching kids a new language and running the business the way that you guys are?
Totally. So what teachers do is they identify what information needs to be taught. Then they prepare an engaging way to teach that information. Then they check for understanding and they assess and they ask for proof of learning. And so that basic structure that a teacher's job is, while being fun to be around, right? While trying to create an atmosphere of fun, all those things have beautifully translated into running a team. And so it's really cool because I think if there's a lot of skills in business ownership that can be transferable from other careers. and vice versa too. Like skills you learn as a business owner are translatable to other areas of your life. And so being open to what skill sets do I already possess, and then what mindsets might I need to develop, becoming a business owner, I think are very helpful, because why don't you capitalize on something you already know, right? And so I think I would definitely encourage that. And one comment I was thinking about previously too, while you and Jesse were just talking, is as a business owner, it's easy to have the mindset that nobody cares about this as much as I do. We've all heard that line, like nobody cares as much as the owner. But if you believe that, then how much time and effort are you going to spend pouring into your team? If you don't believe that they care as much as you. So if you can switch that mindset to say, I can develop people that care as much as I do and are incentivized to run my business well for me so that we all win, you are going to then fuel that fire to pour into them so that everybody wins. And so I think that one mindset for anybody who's a new business owner, if you can own that and really internalize that, that will serve you well.
So as you transitioned into the business ownership role, Amy, did you realize that you always had that mindset? Or were there things that you did, books you read, podcasts, I don't know, what, any kind of personal development that kind of helped you, if you felt like you needed to, kind of groom your mindset for a new venture, or did you already have it?
Well, I definitely grew into it. I fumbled and stumbled a lot over the course of the first year. We had a manager that I didn't know how to effectively lead, unfortunately, and the personality and the mix of the whole thing wasn't what it needed to be. And I didn't really know that beforehand, but I had to make adjustments on the fly. And so we ended up, even with our first store, putting a new manager into place close to the end of the first year of business. And then by necessity, I learned how to delegate more and oversee better and be more strategic about what we were focusing on in order to get the business to the next level. A couple books that really did help me. There's one called Man Up by Bedros Keuilian, and it's really the idea of it's all my fault. So if the business is failing, it's my fault. If the business is successful, it's my fault. If my coaches are incompetent, my staff doesn't know what they're doing, it's my fault. I must have missed something somewhere. So what can I do? And that can be scary, or it could be encouraging to know, like, you actually have a lot more control over this than you think you do. So that book, and then there's another book called Extreme Ownership as well. And it's, I forget who wrote that as well, but it's the same idea that it's on you, right? And so what do you need to do to develop your own mindset around other people and learn about your strengths and weaknesses personally as well? Mm-hmm. So building self-awareness helps you to be more humble and to be more open to growth. Like, for example, in my life, I identified there's a great book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and it talks about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Do you know the book, Drew?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's really eye-opening, mm-hmm. because a fixed mindset, that is a belief that really your skills are fixed. Mm-hmm. Your intelligence is fixed. Your capacity and your talents are basically fixed and not able to be developed over time. So if you're bad at something, you just weren't cut out for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just accept it, right?
Yeah. And if you make a mistake, that means if you have a failure, you are a failure as a person. It's really internally destructive. Mm-hmm. But then there's a growth mindset, and the growth mindset says anything can be learned. How empowering is that? Any failure I have is simply information on how I can do better next time. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean anything about me, and I don't need to go hide in the corner. It means I can take this information and get better at something and do it better in the future. It's this very empowering mindset. So when I discovered that in my personal growth journey, now I had some language to identify and catch myself in the moments where I was having a fixed mindset and getting defeated and getting stuck and worried and fearful and mm-hmm. shame-based, versus that empowered mindset that, no, this is figure outable.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, again, I get a chance. I joke with my candidates that I'm living with a semi-absentee multi-unit franchisee, and I'm the corporate guy that's got an Outlook calendar full of, so I get to live with, kind of the vision that I'm helping people get into, or hopefully helping people get into. But when she went through that sort of, I don't know what you call it, realization, that mindset, it was like not a switch instantly, but I started to see that when there was a challenge, she was like, I'm going to fix this versus what's wrong with me. And I'm going to make a strong claim, and I think I can back this up. If you think that mindset and understanding yourself is kind of woo woo and it's not real business stuff, you're never going to be successful at any level. If you don't work on this, and if you don't figure out how you personally are taking things the wrong way, or interpreting things the wrong way, or getting in your own way, and own that and work on that, you will figure out the ceiling. And the ceiling will not be the franchisor's fault, or your coach's fault, or the marketing department's fault. It will be you. And I'm coming to believe, in my years working in this industry, that self-awareness is probably the number one most critical aspect of any business owner, franchise owner. If you don't know where you're strong and weak, and where the landmines are in your own personality and in your own way of viewing the world, if you're not aware of that, it doesn't mean you're never going to be perfect. You're always going to need to work on stuff. And if you don't have somebody that you can trust to kind of speak into your life a little bit, whether it's a spouse or a coach, or a friend, or if you're religious, a pastor, a minister, somebody who's just saying like, hey, let's talk about things, I think your ceiling's going to be you. But when you talk to those franchisees, Drew, they tell you that the ceiling is the franchisor, or the ceiling is their manager, or the ceiling is something else. That if only these kids worked harder nowadays, I'd be more successful, or whatever. And it's like that switch with Amy specifically was a huge transition in our business, to where when things go wrong, she's like, all right, how do I fix this? Versus, oh no, the sky's falling. And even that mentality, if you work for somebody that's nervous and worried, if you're an employee of a business like a franchise location, and your boss is always worried and negative and nervous, it's going to translate. But if they see challenges as something to overcome, but again, that's not something that only some people can have. That's figure outable or learnable for anybody. You just have to say, I'm going to do that work. And so I think for a lot of semi-absentee business owners in franchising, I think they need to spend time early working on themselves a little bit, read some books, talk to some folks that are farther along, and really see yourself as probably one of the biggest impacts on the business is going to be, what you bring to the table from a mindset perspective. And don't assume that because you were successful in corporate America, that everything will translate. There are certainly things that will translate. But one of the things I see with franchisees is they ran a marketing department for a $50 million company, but they had everything else kind of done for them, right? They had legal, they had HR hiring for them. So they were very important in a very small and specific skill set with a lot on the line. When you go into a small business, you are legal and HR and marketing. It's the context is much smaller, but your role is much wider. And just being aware of that, just saying, okay, this is a different thing. I'm not at Coca-Cola or HP anymore. I'm at, Drew's fitness studio or Jesse's fitness studio, and I have to run this business in a different way. Just understanding some of these dynamics, getting with a coach, pay for some business coaching. It might be the best money you spend early in your business career, because whatever you bring to the table that limits your business won't go away until you work on it. And so I think with Amy, that was like, I'm just so impressed. Every morning she has her planner out and a book she's reading, and she's really kind of taking some time in the morning to work on her and organization stuff before getting into any of the tasks of the business. And I think it's really paid off for her. So,
yeah, you guys have I would describe it as an ambitious humility among, in terms of just like, just getting to know you guys better. Like you want to win, you're competitive, you want to build something significant.
Sure.
But you're going about it in a humble way, with this drive that's forging you guys forward. But it's not, you guys don't, expect anything, that you're going to have to make it happen and figure out how to make it happen, whether that's hiring a good manager, helping them hire good employees, whatever it may be. I don't know. One of the themes as I've been doing this podcast, and, I just started doing it, didn't really have a theme, except I wanted to have amazing people and talk to amazing people, like you guys. But it's definitely a journey. Like entrepreneurship is, you can't script it, and it's different for everybody. Like the fundamentals can be similar in terms of like what it takes to be successful, what it takes to run a multi-unit semi-absentee operation successfully. Like the fundamentals are the fundamentals, but like how somebody personally gets themselves in the mindset it's a very personal thing, I think. Like the books that you mentioned, Amy, they may not resonate with somebody else at the time where their head's at, in that specific moment in life. Right. So, but, if you keep your head on a swivel and, keep an eye out and are willing to pick up a book or listen to a podcast and continue to do that, like you'll find something that connects with you and resonates with you in your language or, how you view the world. But you have to have that thing that's kind of pushing you forward. Like, where you want to get to, but you don't exactly know how you're going to get there kind of thing. But, that's what a journey is, right? You just you can't predict what you're going to run into on a journey. But, anyways, I'm getting philosophical, but that's kind of, I think that might be my theme of the podcast. After you guys have shared more about this, I appreciate you helping me figure that out.
Yeah, but, I would say just a real quick thing is like, think about small business owners can get this persecution mindset where everybody's against them and everything's tough for them, right? It's sort of, you hear them and hiring and this and that. And it's like, what's it like to be your employee? What's it like to be your customer, right? You are not the star of the show. You're a servant of your employees. You're a servant of your clients. You're trying to create an experience. You're trying to create a good place to work. So we ask ourselves, what would it be like to work for us? What would it be like to work in our studio? What's great about the job and what might not be great about the job? And just being honest with everything and putting yourself in other people's shoes. And, Amy and I get phone calls sometimes from franchisees in our system because, they know that we are not the top performer, but we're in that group of folks that have been around for a while and, have gotten some awards and things. And we're certainly not the best franchisees in the system, but we get phone calls and we get people reaching out and asking, and they all think that there's like a secret that the franchisor isn't telling them or that whatever. And they're always amazed when you get on the phone and say, well, have you gone through every single piece of training in the business manual and made sure that all of your employees do everything that you're taught as well as they can?
Well, what's the manual? A manual. I haven't opened that manual. What?
Wait, is that a thing? Have you done the fundamentals, well, and they're looking for a shortcut to success. They're looking for a secret. Where do you get your clients? Are you getting some special free clients that nobody else knows about? Nope. We're spending a lot of money on Facebook like you are. We're just making sure that our lead to prospect rate is as high as we can. Our prospect to client rate is as high as we can. Our conversion rate is as high as it's the fundamentals, but then there's behaviors under each of those metrics. And so that goes back to her management style, but it's also like, guys, if you aren't doing what the franchisor has taught you to do as well as you can, don't ask about next level yet. Just nail the fundamentals. And there's a good chance that you'll be in the top half of the system by the time you finish that. Then sure, go after the networking, go after the special sauce, go after the things that you feel like might take you to the next level. But if you're a struggling franchisee listening to this in a system where there are people that are outperforming you and you expect to call them and ask for some special hint, there's likely not, a special nugget. They just probably are doing all the things along that chain of whatever it takes to bring in revenue slightly better than you. And you stack all that up and it's a big number at the end of the day. And so focus on the fundamentals. Every business has a different pipeline, different KPIs, different rates. Your franchisor should know where you should be. Hopefully they should benchmark and tell you where you stack up, and then just attack the things you aren't good at and just keep fixing stuff that isn't working. Be open, be humble as much as you can. And you'll probably find yourself with a pretty good business on your hands if you bought into a strong system by just doing the fundamentals well. And that's what I think. Amy doesn't get distracted too much by shiny objects. She's not chasing the home run. She's just making sure that everybody's doing everything pretty well most of the time. And at the end of the day, that leads to a pretty successful business.
One book I would recommend is by Scott Greenberg, The Wealthy Franchisee. Everyone should read that book. And one thing he talks about in there is, again, the art of teaching somebody something. So if you're not in there, what do your team members need to be doing really well in order for your business to succeed? So he gives a basic 3-step process, and it is show them and then have them demo it back to you while you're sitting there, and then revisit and assess later, like shadow them doing it, or whatever. That simple thing, do I know that they're doing those things? Anyway, that book is great because it's filled with little tips like that of, how to make sure that people are constantly growing and developing. And like Jesse said, you're never done. You're just never done. And let's not expect that, right? Let's always continue to grow and develop and do this to the best of our ability. Otherwise, any business that coasts, is going to eventually decline. We just know that. That's human nature. So how can we work against that tendency?
Well said. That's the opportunity with owning your own business, right? Is like you have that ability and that opportunity to create something that doesn't have limits or doesn't have a ceiling, versus the alternative, which is going to work for somebody else where there are constraints, right? And so no, that's a lot of wisdom that you guys have shared. So what's next for you guys in your journey?
Depends on the day and who you ask, right? We're actively considering another location with Exercise Coach, because we love the brand and because we've, when you figure something out, not perfectly, but when you feel like you can run it pretty well, of course. Drew knows this because he and I are friends and we've spent time, and I'm always like, oh, maybe we should do something else. And I think you said to me when we were playing golf one day, it's like, why don't you just do what you guys are already good at? I'm like, well, that's not bad counsel. So, we're looking at another location in our geography. There's a fourth territory that would make sense. Like if you looked at a map and you thought about the Twin Cities, having a certain part of the metro would make sense for us. And we have a coach, an assistant manager in one of our stores. So what Amy does is have a manager and then an assistant manager in each location. And the assistant manager knows how to do almost everything the manager knows how to do. And the manager is required to train that assistant manager in those tasks. And so we have a bench, right? So we can take that person to the next location. We have a couple talented people, one in particular who I think would enjoy doing that. And we've always thought about other concepts, maybe doing something else in a different industry, potentially franchise as well. But, we got a lot on our plate. We've got a 9th grader, a 7th grader, and a 1st grader, all girls. And one of them's getting rides from her high school friends, and the other one's still, watching cartoons in the morning. So we have a busy family. I work in the development side with Fastlane representing Exercise Coach and continue to have a big pipeline there. So it's a blessing to work on a brand, for a number of years, as you know, but we're open-minded. We like to keep our ears and eyes open, but we're going to really just execute on what's in front of us. And right now the 3 stores are doing well. The 3rd store is a little over a year old. And that's where it starts to level, that's where it starts to say, okay, now it's built, right? The first 2 are very mature. The 3rd store is still a newer location. It's about 14, 15 months old, but it's on its own feet right now. So we're going to enjoy that for a little bit, look at opening another location. And, our kids are getting to the age where maybe we start talking to them about joining us one day in a few years, who knows? But we're just kind of enjoying this season of life where we've put a lot of time and effort into things, and they're kind of paying off. And it's a good spot to be. But ask me in a week and I'll have a different idea.
I don't know where I read this. Probably High Performance Habits. I'm sorry, I keep dropping book titles by Brendan Burchard. But what does success look like? Asking yourself what success really looks like to you. And work and career is one category of success, but also what are the values that we have as a family, and what are the values we have personally? Are we leaving ourselves enough time and bandwidth to develop those other areas as well? That's also what success looks like too. So, that's important to me, and asking like where we're going is, hey, time we're pouring into our kids, that's also success too. And so, how can we keep leveling up every area and trying our best to keep everything strong? It's not perfect, but how can we make sure our attention stays in a variety of places too. I think that helps me some days when it's easy to get too myopic and all consumed with being a business owner as my identity and not, other areas. So I think that's helpful.
Oh yeah. Lifestyle and family, right? That's why we're doing this whole business thing, right? To be able to enjoy that. Yep. I have no doubt that you guys are going to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve in this next chapter, whatever it may be. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story. And again, congratulations on your guys' success. It's inspiring.
Thank you so much for having us, Drew.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And I think what you do to help people identify the right fit for them is critical, working even with a coach before selecting a franchise is important. And I know you've got your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry. So anybody listening to this podcast that's working with Drew, I think you're in good hands. And he's been in the franchising industry for quite some time and is a very well-respected voice. And that's the nice thing about this industry is we all want everybody to succeed. It's good for the entire franchise industry when franchisors grow, franchisees are successful and profitable, franchise consultants make good matches. It's a very much the tide lifts all boats in this industry. And that's what I really like about where we're at is that the collaboration versus competition ratio is very, very high. And it creates a really, really nice industry and nice environment. So it's a pleasure getting on with you, Drew. Thanks so much for having us and allowing us to share our story.
Yeah, well, I'll put a check in the mail for that plug. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much, Jesse. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I enjoyed it, guys. So thanks and good luck with the next chapter. That's a wrap. Hope you found a nugget or two in there that can help you on your franchise journey. And if you ever want to talk franchising, reach out to me anytime.